Welcome back, guys. In today's video we are going to be transforming the engine bay on Project MR2. We're going to be taking it from something that looks like this and turning it into something that looks like this. It should be a good one. Let's go and take a look. Now in this video I'm going to be taking you through what you need to remove to get access, all the products I'm going to be using and everything. It's going to be nice and in-depth so that you can hopefully achieve the same on your Mark 1. But before we get into it, let's familiarise ourselves with what the engine bay used to look like when I first got the car about 4 months ago. The car had been unused and left outside for about 12 years and it hadn't run in that time either. It was very oily, very dirty, very dusty, and it was certainly in need of a lot of love. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's have a little look at the products I've used first of all. This is nothing that I've particularly got into stock, it's just stuff that I've had lying around in the garage really. Engine degreaser spray and also a spray bottle. And then some brushes to agitate it. I've used this to remove all of the oil, all the dirty stuff on the block, and anything that's oily I've used to clean it. T-cut metallic. It doesn't have to be metallic, it's just a cutting compound of sorts. I've used that all around the aperture where all the paint was faded and yellow and horrible. That will get it up beautiful. For inside the depths of the engine bay, I've got a nice cheap eBay steamer. Fill it with water, turn it on, press the button and steam comes out the nozzle. There's a selection of nozzles you can put on the end of it. That'll help you to get inside the nooks and crannies and the dirty bits of the engine bay. Selection of wire brushes, brass brushes, toothbrushes and so on to remove all of your oxidation on your gearbox and things like that before you paint it. Old microfibers to wipe off all of the excess. Brake and clutch cleaner to degrease before you paint, and also some thinners in a spray bottle to degrease before you paint. BMW Arctic Silver to paint brackets that aren't going to take a huge amount of heat, and aluminium engine paint for painting brackets that are going to take a lot of heat. Satin black for painting stuff that's not going to take a lot of heat. And high temperature engine enamel. We've got a silver, which I've been using for the gearbox to good effect, and a satin black that I've used for the engine block, and the red that I've used for my TVIS sticker, my TVIS logo, because I think that's going to finish off the job very nicely. Original black and back to black bumper shine, we're going to use that for the loom, we'll go into that later in the video. And also an airline for blowing off all the loose rubbish to see what you're left with. So that is pretty much all we're going to need. Now then, first things first, let's have a look at what we need to remove in the engine bay to get far enough into it to clean, paint and prep and finish enough of it so that when we build it back up, it doesn't look like we've been lazy and we've missed things. Now, the first thing that I removed were the rocker covers. They weren't very easy to get off. They were felt like they were welded on at some point. Remove your ringer bolts and your valley plate, HT leads, bits and bobs like that, and then in theory they should just lift off. The most standout part at the moment has been the valve covers. They've been a very enjoyable thing to do. Very, very straightforward. Rub them down, rub all the old paint off, prep them, treat them, paint them with a high temperature aluminium silver paint, and then do all of the letters by hand. I haven't painted inside of here because obviously you've got this little valley cover, the spark plug HT lead cover, which is going in there. So why waste the paint? Now, the next thing that you will need to remove is the inlet manifold, which has been sent away for vapor blasting. There are a few things that you will need to remove to get access to the inlet manifold. You'll have to remove the tubing that comes up to the throttle body, and you can leave the throttle body on the job to remove it all. The two very small coolant lines, this is the only coolant lines that I'm going to remove and disturb on the job, pull them out of the throttle body, and then that side of things is pretty free then, nice and easy. you will need to remove your fuel rail. And as you can see, I've left the injectors in the rail, and the lines, the fuel lines to the rail are flexible. So therefore you can remove your 3 retaining bolts that hold the injector rail into the head, and then you can hold onto the injectors so that they stay in the rail, so you hold onto your fuel pressure and don't get fuel everywhere, and pull them out. There's 2 bolts that hold the fuel lines into the return housing onto the cylinder head. You can remove those and you can pull the whole thing to one side without dropping fuel everywhere. Then you can undo the sections of loom, and then you can pull the loom up a little bit, undo the ring of bolts that hold the inlet manifold and the T-vis onto the job, a couple of connectors underneath on the T-vis, and then you can pull the inlet manifold off the job and the T-vis. But that's all out the way. You can then disconnect your connectors to your coil and your igniter and your alternator, and then you can remove the whole loom out the way. I just cable tied it to the bonnet prop so that it's completely out the way, and I got good access to the block. At that point, I remove the alternator and the alternator bracket that goes onto the block, and that gave me good access to everything on the engine. At that point, you can remove all the loose rust if you've got a rusty block, and then you can degrease it with the gunk, clean it down with thinners or brake cleaner, and then apply a nice coat of, I used the black satin engine enamel, because the engine's going to get hot, it's going to take potential heat. Whilst I was in that local vicinity, I painted the drive shaft, and after the CV boot, the coupler that goes onto the gearbox. And that's that side of things done. It's stripped down in a good amount of depth, and it's quite nice. I also then removed the coil and the igniter, and then that gave me the ability to clean in the depths of the engine bay on the UK driver's side. All the metalwork can be cleaned then, and I reached in with satin black after rubbing it down, and I painted the fan in the back and the engine mount. The same with the igniter, that was oxidized. Rub that down, clean it up, that can go back in after the brackets had a coat of paint. And also all of the wiring loom and all the connectors that are going to go back in that area have been cleaned. But in a second we will go into the cleaning of an old nasty wiring loom to make it look pretty and new. So you've got your fuel lines out the way, you've got your loom out the way, and that side of the engine across to the distributor and all round there is done. And that should, in theory, look something like this. Now then, heat shield on the exhaust manifold. I masked everything up, rubbed it down, degreased it, and I gave it a coat of high temperature spray satin black, because obviously that's going to get very hot, but now it's got the ability to take the heat. So now that we've done the engine and that side, let's move over to the gearbox side of things and see what we need to remove to get access to thoroughly paint the gearbox in position properly. Now, a lot of things have stayed in place, and it gives you the ability to move things around. Now, I have removed the loom on top of the gearbox, and also the bracket that bolts on top by the slave cylinder that holds the flow and return heater hoses. That then gives you the ability to move them and flex them as you paint the gearbox. A lot of the top of the gearbox was clean, but moving down by the output shafts and stuff like that, it was grotty and needed a wire brush to get rid of all the oxidation. At that point, I removed some more of the loom by the starter motor, that sort of area, pulled it all up out the way, jacked the car up, slid underneath, and painted the bits of the gearbox that are right in the depths of the engine bay that you cannot get to from the top of the engine bay. I then got a smaller brush, and you can get to pretty much all of the gearbox in position. At that point, I moved over and removed the lifting hooks on the engine, on the top of the cylinder head, because they started to look a bit nasty in comparison to the rest of the stuff. At that point, I removed those, painted them with silver, and they will go back on later. And then when you remove the bracket that holds the heater hoses on, you can then get into the slave cylinder and also the bracket that holds the gear selector rods. With everything out the way then, you can get in a little bit deeper, clean, and then paint silver. So in theory, everything that you can see from the top has been painted. And now we've gone to that depth of the engine bay and cleaned and painted, and we can start to build our way back up. Now, as we build our way back up, we will look at cleaning and treating, if you will, to make them look nice, the heater hoses, the fuel lines, and most importantly, that old nasty wire loom. Now the wire loom, as you can see, it's a mess. 30 years of grime and dirt and nastiness. Now unfortunately, some of this loom is taped, which is tricky to get in and out of the bits of tape to clean. And then you've got the corrugated sections as well. But the best way that I've found to do this is cleaning wipes. They're quite a moist wipe and they've been very, very handy. You can get all the way around the loom and you can clean majority of it. Like I was saying previously, I have cleaned all of the plugs as well, because the plugs are dirty and old and horrible. When you clean them up, they look nice in comparison to a clean engine bay. In my opinion, you don't want to go to this amount of trouble, reassemble, and then have a dirty loom. Now, that's great for cleaning, but however, the corrugated parts are tricky to get into. That is where the black bumper shine comes into play. I've sprayed a little bit in a lid or a container, and then I've got a paintbrush. Put it on the paintbrush, and then you can paint in and out of the ridges. Use the brush to stipple inside of the ridges of the loom, and then it dries back nice. It's not all sticky and horrible, and it comes up lovely. Now with the heater hoses and the fuel lines and any other hose in the engine bay, it's dry and it's grey and it's dirty. Wipe it off with the wipes and then go over it with the black bumper shine. So all of these hoses that you see in this area and the loom has been cleaned. And now I can move on to the rest of the loom that's going to be by the inlet manifold. And then when the inlet manifold is back from vapor blasting, I'll show you that and we'll move on to the next stage. Happy days. Right, good news. Inlet manifold is back from vapor blasting and it looks incredible. Take a look at it. I'm really, really, really happy with this. And also they've managed to save the two original gaskets as well. So I don't think it's a massively abrasive process, but it looks beautiful. So I'm more than happy with that. That can go back on very soon. I'm going to reuse the original gaskets, and the T-vis has been cleaned and painted. Check the operation of it. So that is all fine. That can go back on too. Now the original metal gaskets had a few tiny little bits of rust on them. So I'll rub that down and I'll put a little bit of non-setting sealer on those. So that will go again. Also, the beady-eyed among you will notice that I have done what I said I wouldn't do because I've gone too far. I've removed the fuel rail and I've taken all the injectors out of it. Now, you do not need to go this far. You can just take the 3 bolts out the rail, pull the rail and the injectors up across and put them down here. Okay, we'll tie them out of the way. You do not need to go as far as I've gone. But at the same time, it gave me a good opportunity to paint the fittings on the fuel lines that are going to be very tricky to do in position. Clean and paint the fuel pressure regulator, remove the injectors, check the seals into the rail, which are in good condition. They're nice and plump, they're not cracked, they'll go again, and clean the injectors. So yeah, I may have gone a little bit further than I thought I was going to go, and I thought I was going too far about halfway into this video, but never mind. Now then, I've fitted the alternator, but you don't need to see that because it's boring. It's all tensioned up and all I've done is clean it and paint the end cap that goes on the end of it. So that is that. Let's jump into it. Let's do a little bit of time lapse. Let's watch it all come together nicely. Happy days. Enjoy. Well, that come out pretty well, didn't it? Now then, it's one thing looking pretty, it's another thing being functional. So we need to turn the key and check that everything still runs. There are a couple of things that I'm going to do before that. I've topped up a little bit of lost coolant, and we need to check for potential fuel leaks, because obviously the rail's been apart and the lines into the rail, as you saw, etc. Now what we're going to do is put the ignition on to the first position, grab a link of wire, and we're going to link out FP and B+ on the diagnostics box, which is going to kick the fuel pump in, pressurize the system. We'll leave it running for 10-20 seconds and then check for leaks. And once I'm happy there is no leaks, we'll turn the key, and in theory the car should run, hopefully. Let's do that now. That all went very well. Pump ran for 30 seconds, no smell of fuel, no weeps, no drips, no fuel leaks. So now it's time to turn the key and give it a try. A little bit nervous, a little bit. See how we get on. Well, that's the result. It all runs nicely and no visible leaks. And I go as far as saying that this came out better than I ever imagined it would do a month ago when I started taking off that inlet manifold just to clean it. And it's not cost very much either, guys. The most expensive bit has been the vapor blasting, and the rest of it has just been tins of paint and time. And when this is your hobby, time is free. So this really has cost next to nothing to achieve. And I hope this video inspires you to have a go on your Mark 1 as well. Get it stripped down, take your time, be methodical, use this video as a guide if you want to, and hopefully you can achieve exactly the same. Now, before I go, I'll leave you with a little bit of shocking footage of when I reconnected the battery yesterday. Let's just say the paint isn't quite as thick on that retaining bracket as I thought it was. See you soon.